Coming to you from the Hudson Media Group studio, this is Talking Politics, and I am New Jersey's premier journalist and the sworn enemy of all the local liberals, social justice clowns, and woke fools, Fernando Uribe. Hope you're all doing well. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get started. Here's what I'm thinking about right now. Folks, I'm sure I've talked about it before, and I'm sure I'll continue to talk about it again, but as always, I'm here to be your culture warrior and to sort of speak out against the nonsense of wokeism that seems to be permeating in almost every facet of our society. And of course, it's back to pop culture. Now, while living in New Brunswick, while attending Rutgers University during my undergraduate years, one of the majors that I almost pursued was English. Now, I graduated with a bachelor's in criminal justice and a bachelor's in sociology, but I was also pursuing a third bachelor's in English. I loved English literature, I loved writing, but more importantly, I loved reading. One of my favorite authors was Ian Fleming. Now, for all of you, maybe hopefully should know who that is. Ian Fleming is the acclaimed British author who published a plethora of the great books that we know, documenting the character of James Bond in the 007 series. So for well over half a century, we've been blessed with his books and, of course, a series of movies based on those classics. We've had outstanding actors like Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan, and of course, most recently, Daniel Craig playing the iconic character of James Bond. Now, coming up in October, No Time to Die will be the final movie for this version of James Bond, Daniel Craig. A lot of speculation is circulating about what's going to happen to James Bond ultimately. But one thing that Daniel Craig spoke out about this week, and hopefully he will not get canceled for it, is that James Bond should not be played by a woman. So let me just give you some details here about some articles that have come out in the past week on our news feeds. Now, Daniel Craig has gone on and said he would rather prefer to see the Skyfall than watch James Bond be played by a woman. Now, he told various publications this past week that there are, quote, better parts for women to play than James Bond. Quote, why should a woman play James Bond when there should be just as good of a role as James Bond, but not for a woman? And as well, it came within, again, a week's time of the release of No Time to Die. Now, his comments echo those of the franchise's producer, Barbara Broccoli, who told Variety in 2020 that, quote, James Bond can be of any color, but he is male. She also added that she would rather write new characters specifically for women rather than make the iconic lead role a woman. Now, that's a breath of fresh air for me, folks, but I've talked about this previously. This fixation on gender swapping and the fact that woke fools have to be up in arms and in a hissy fit about what characters should be. Folks, it's James Bond, not Jane Bond. Okay? Can we stop messing with iconic, both literary characters and movie and or television characters as well? Because you want to appeal to a certain demographic, because you want to seem woke, you want to seem hip or down. Folks, there are just certain characters you do not touch. There are just certain characters that you just leave alone. What that's telling me is that Hollywood is becoming lazy. Instead of coming up with new roles for women, let's just try to duplicate what's already been a success. And I echo Daniel Craig's sentiments when it comes to James Bond. It's an iconic character. I love the aspect of James Bond. The Bachelor, tall, dark, and handsome, gambler, drinker, womanizer. These are all, qualities that most men, again, admire. And again, it's what's made James Bond such an amazing character over the decades that we've seen the movies. And of course, if you've read the books like I have, they're just literary masterpieces. But of course, like anything else, we have to appeal to, again, a certain crowd on the left that everything has to be about gender, everything has to be about identity or race. And I get it. Folks, listen, there's a lot of multiculturalism going on around the planet, of course, specifically in Europe. Now, if you want to come at me and say, hey, listen, the next James Bond should be a man of color, I have no problem with that. If you've been to England lately, you'll notice that there has been an influx of men of color immigrating to Great Britain and the United Kingdom for decades now. If you watch soccer like I do, whether it's the Premier League or just international competition, there are plenty of men of color on the British national team. That's not my issue. But when you want to just gender swap an iconic role for the sake of, let's appeal to the woke crowd. Folks, I'm tired of it. I've been talking about it on this show forever, and I'll continue talking about it. I have no desire to placate anybody on the left or any of the woke crowd. It's the same thing with comic book characters. I get it, for example, Captain America. Yes, there have been issues that have been written and published about a gay Captain America. Well, folks, that's all well and good, but let's keep Captain America as we know the character as is, okay? Steve Rogers didn't go after Paul, he went after Peggy. Okay? That was the great aspect about, Steve Rogers, especially in the MCU, right? At the end of Endgame, what was one of the more perfect scenes? The fact that he got his happy ending. He got to live happily ever after with Peggy Carter, right? That's what made Steve Rogers' role so iconic. Folks, listen, I have nothing against the LGBT community. If you're a guy and you're sweet, God bless you. I have nothing against you. Live your life. I won't bother you. Don't bother me. That's all well and good. But the idea that we have to start placating or start sort of, refurbishing characters just to appeal to demographic. Folks, I'm sorry. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't make me a boomer. It doesn't make me, disconnected. It doesn't make me some grandpa. None of those things. I just like the purity and authenticity of certain characters. And that's what we should do. So getting back to James Bond here, yes, you know what? It's obviously a conclusion to the series. I'm hoping that when Daniel Craig obviously, ends the movie, A, hopefully he doesn't die, and B, that James Bond continues in the next series with a male role. There's no need for a female to play James Bond. Folks, again, that's not being sexist, that's not being misogynist, which I admit I can be both. But this isn't one of the examples, folks. This is an example where we need to stop placating those on the left and those that are woke, because now we have to make sure we're all inclusive. Folks, I don't know about you. You can be inclusive without being nauseating. And again, that's what I keep saying about those on the left, all the local liberals, the social justice clowns and the woke fools. Yes, your heart's in the right place, but as always, ideologically and everything else, your head's always up your ass. And I'm sorry, I have to be the one to tell you that, but I'll continue doing so until it gets through all of your thick heads. And that's what I'm thinking about right now. On this week's edition of the 5-time award-winning podcast Talkin' the Hudson, which you can listen to every week online via www.blogtalkradio.com/talkinthehudson, was acclaimed attorney and a noted activist, Sofia Frontera. Now, we spoke for over an hour on a multitude of different topics, but one topic that really stands out for her is domestic violence. Having been a victim of domestic violence herself, she's dedicated her life to being an advocate for the last 20 years. Not just with the law that she practices, but of course also with the book that she's published on the topic. We discuss why domestic violence awareness still is not highlighted as much as it should in today's climate. Let's check out what she had to say.
Let's get right to it here. I know we talked off the air a little bit about another show that I host, Real Talk with Fernando Uribe, which airs on Mondays at 6 p.m. via StreamYard on Facebook Live. And I know you took some interest in that episode because of my guest, but also, I had the pleasure of meeting you recently at the statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce event at Red Bull Stadium. It was a great mixer. It was a great, I thought it was just a great event overall, just to highlight important organizations and causes. And there's a lot to you. There's a lot of layers to you, counselor, when it comes to like what you're doing in the community. But first and foremost, what really, when we talk about female empowerment and how you've become such an advocate for women, where did that come about, and was there an epiphany that sort of brought it about?
Well, for me, let me start by saying I'm a survivor of domestic abuse, and it was a very disempowering situation, and I don't want anyone to go through what I went through, and that's why I'm out there trying to educate the community and to help women discover that they have the power and the answers that they need to live a happy life. And I have been involved in domestic violence awareness and advocacy for 28 years come October. And this stems from my marriage, in which I discovered within 24 hours of the wedding that I had married someone who was psychologically abusive. And I did not see that coming. And I didn't even realize that it was an abusive relationship until I did an internship at the Essex County Superior Court Domestic Violence Unit. So there are many misconceptions about domestic abuse, and I want people to know the facts, know the reality, so they can be a part of the solution, and not just women, but men as well.
You know what, Sonia, well said there. And it's a problem that, despite the amount of PSAs that we see on television, whether we see it in workshops in our public schools and universities and college campuses, domestic violence is still as serious a problem as it's ever been. I mean, you would think, and I mean this generically for our audience, that with the amount of outreach that we're seeing, again, in municipalities and states and hopefully in legislation that is passed, not just in New Jersey but around the country, that this problem would really be addressed and we would see less of a severity of the problem. And I hate to say it. I mean, I'm not trying to sound apocalyptic here because I'm always sort of an eternal optimist, but it just seems like this is a problem that is still running rampant, not just here in New Jersey, but nationally. And that's alarming. I can't just even imagine for victims, but for people that are working in mental health, people that are working in our court system. I worked in, criminal justice for 10 years before proceeding to academia. And I saw domestic violence firsthand with people that I had to talk to, probationers, victim organizations, victims in general. I think it's really disappointing that despite all the efforts that we're making as a society, domestic violence is still, I would argue, a public health epidemic.
Oh, absolutely, it is, and especially with the onset of COVID, because now you have couples and they are trapped in the home and they no longer have access to, especially during the lockdowns, they don't have access to those activities and the outlet for them to reduce the stress, as well as the financial pressures when one of the partners or both lose their jobs due to COVID. So it has become increasingly more of an epidemic. But I think when it comes to domestic violence, I think it's always been a problem. I think it's more out in the open than it used to be, and I still think it's underreported. And there are so many layers to this problem, and they all have to be tackled for there to be a solution.
Secondly, we discussed what the New Jersey State Legislature is still lacking when it comes to domestic violence awareness, whether it's stricter statutes, whether it's whatever it can be. It's not really helping victims in the long term, and we discuss what, again, both the state Senate and the state assembly can do to help women and men who have been victims of domestic violence and domestic abuse.
Sonia, let's get our legal thinking caps on for a moment, counselor. And you've been practicing law for some time. I'm not a JD, I'm a PhD, but I'd like to think of myself as someone who's pretty well read on these issues, and someone, again, who before entering academia and working in higher education, I worked in our criminal justice system for 10 years, so I saw firsthand, working in county jails, the impact that domestic violence had on people that I supervised that were on probation, and also in my capacity working as an investigator for the public defender. But this is where, I really want to pick your brain here. As I asked Nick Luciano on Monday and also on my other show with him, where do you think the legislature in Trenton here in New Jersey is dropping the ball? What is not being done in terms of bills that should be introduced or statutes that should be enforced, or just in general, what needs to be done better in New Jersey to help victims and to really, expose this serious public health issue?
I think the most important thing is to have laws that protect the victims. I think it's important to educate law enforcement how to respond to these situations and have more options available for the victims so that victims know that someone's got their back. Because one of the hardest things for a victim is to get out for not having the support, not having a place to go, not having the resources to get their lives back on track. And this is something that needs more awareness and more funding and stronger penalties for anyone who commits acts of violence. And I think to the degree that there are special units to help victims, that's all the more important, because not everyone who's involved in processing these cases has the knowledge to understand these dynamics because they are so complex. You can't just reduce them to scientific or psychological type situations, and you can't look at them at just like your typical crime. And I think the domestic violence problem needs to be looked at holistically. And how it affects the victims, and I especially, for me, the most important thing is training the people who have to deal with these types of situations, because if they don't understand what they're dealing with, they're not going to be effective at it. They may not understand what the victim is going through. I have seen it in court where you see judges who don't appreciate the perspective of the victim. They come across as hysterical or crazy, or they lose their patience with them. And I think these are all the different pieces of the domestic violence problem that need to be looked at and work in concert so that the response is effective.
It was a very interesting conversation, and once again, you can listen to it in its entirety by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/talkingtohudson. The episode is available anywhere and any time from any PC, Mac, smartphone, or tablet. I also want to thank Sofia Frontera for her time on the episode, and certainly I'm one of the few journalists, ladies and gentlemen, throughout the state of New Jersey that's talking about domestic violence and really trying to highlight and be an advocate for victims everywhere. I'll continue having great guests like Sofia Frontera in the immediate future. And now some local stories for your consideration. Let's start in the Mile Square city of Hoboken, where residents in downtown, of course, have something new to bitch about. And a special thank you to Terry West with the Jersey Journal for her report on this story. Now, apparently, downtown Hoboken will be closing 2 blocks so pubs can expand during Sunday Funday for the NFL season, but some residents obviously aren't game for it. So again, let me just sort of unravel this and why the story is so interesting. So it's the kind of site that would have felt like a utopia in the most isolating days of the pandemic. Friends and strangers alike gathered outside, cheering and drinking in the streets. Cash flowing through the local businesses while traffic has been deprioritized in favor of the opportunity to commune. For all but one Sunday through October the 24th, 2 blocks of Hoboken's First Street will be closed to traffic, allowing that the area's 4 bars to expand onto the street and sports fans can gather to watch the NFL. Now, it's an initiative by Mayor Ravi Bala and his administration that quietly debuted last weekend with the support of the Hoboken Business Alliance. Now, the 2 blocks span from Washington Street to Garden Street and include 4 Irish bars. A similar one-off event was held in July for the European Soccer Championship final, and now, quote, First Street Sundays will be an every Sunday occasion from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., the city announced last week. Now, businesses on the 2 blocks, including even a bookstore and a guitar store, appreciate the community atmosphere and find it good for business, and believe participants aren't all that loud. Even New Jersey's First Lady, Tammy Murphy, was in attendance on September 12th, and she found the event to have a nice European atmosphere at the famous McSwiggan's Pub, along with owner Paul Heighton. But some neighbors fear that now they've become the host of a weekly party that they've never agreed to. Michael Schreiber, who spoke with the Jersey Journal, who lives in the same block as McSwiggan's Pub on Bloomfield Street, says he's emailed the mayor and council members on behalf of 21 families on his block 2 days before the first football event with the subject line, turning First Street into a fraternity house every Sunday. Now, the email went on to say, quote, the bar's benefit comes at the expense of all of us who live in the same area. A major street closing adds to traffic. Allowing open beer gardens on the street adds to trash. Setting up TV tents and serving pitcher specials attracts hordes of out-of-town 20-somethings, resulting in noise that makes it difficult to conduct normal life activities in one's own home. Folks, let me say this to Michael Schreiber and the rest of the crybabies that live in that area. You moved to downtown Hoboken. Again, newsflash, you moved to downtown Hoboken. You're not living in Paramus. You're not living in Parsippany. Hell, you're not even living in, the Highlands down in South Jersey. You decide to live in a very busy, noisy downtown area of any city. Folks, these things will happen. I don't know about you. I'm a diehard NFL fan. I am glad to see the NFL back. I'm glad my Dallas Cowboys are 1-1, hopefully 2-1 coming up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Folks, after what we've been through for the last year and a half, being stuck at home, and you know what? With good weather outside, it's 1 day out of the week. It's 1 month out of the year. And yet, again, a lot of these privileged downtown Hobokenites feel the need to bitch and moan about something. If it's not about, a downtown festival, or Leprechaun, the Irish festival, or SantaCon, sort of the Christmas festival, you know what? This is what bothers me about, again, overly privileged people in downtown Hoboken. Okay? It's not a big deal. You can find something else to do. If you don't want to be home and watch the NFL or go to one of these events at these pubs, then find something else to do. It's still nice weather. Go apple picking. Go pumpkin picking. I don't know. Go to the park. Go to Manhattan. Go down the shore. Weather's still nice for it. But all you want to do is ruin it for everybody else. It's not the end of the world. And again, if you choose to live in a downtown section of a city, I'm not going to feel sorry for you. Hello, downtown of any city. Noise, water, wet. Stop your bitching and moaning. Come on, you're grown-ass men and women having hissy fits. Like you're some girl that got dumped at the prom. Stop your bitching and moaning. Let people have their fun. I know that Hoboken PD will be strictly monitoring the area, and I know it's something that the mayor doesn't want to get out of control. Again, he's made a point about quality of life issues. This is one of them. Stop your bitching and moaning. Let people enjoy the NFL because you know what? It's Sunday Fun Day. And now let's move to Union City. And since it is still Hispanic Heritage Month, let me tell you about a great event that took place at Union City High School. Now, the senior United States Senator, Robert Menendez, the son of Cuban immigrants, kicked off again Hispanic Heritage Month this past weekend with a celebration at Roosevelt Stadium on top of Union City High School. Now, the former mayor of Union City, who is also the highest-ranking Hispanic in Congress, was joined by elected officials and Cuban singer, actor, and model Yotel Romero at the 11th annual event. Now, Romero is a Latin Grammy Award-winning singer who wrote Patria y Vida, the song that inspired the pro-democracy protest in Cuba earlier this summer. Now, as you can see there, it was great to catch up with the senator and talk to him at the event and certainly, collaborate with others that were there. Now, the senator went on to say during a speech at the event, quote, "Throughout our history, Latinos have shaped this country for the better. We have defended this nation and our ideals. We have grown our economy and driven our culture. And we have built families and communities bound together by faith, love, and respect for those who came before us. That indomitable immigrant spirit, that thirst for freedom, that love for family, that undenying belief in the American dream has enlivened the country for generations." Joining the senator was New Brunswick Councilwoman Rebecca Escobar, who was the mistress of ceremonies, of the event, which was attended by more than 400 people, including myself. Now, former Governor James McGreevey, State Senator Joe Cryan, Hudson County Assemblywoman Angelica Jimenez, Elizabeth Councilwoman Patricia Perkins, Dover Alderman Adrian Ballesteros, and Union City Commissioners Salim Valdivia and Lucio Fernandez were also those in attendance. Now, Romero gave the keynote address, and Don Francisco, the iconic host of Sábado Gigante, which you all grew up with if you watched Univision, was a legendary media personality and long-term host there that greeted everyone in attendance via a virtual message. Now, folks, again, being a proud Hispanic, being the son of immigrants, my mom being Cuban and Spaniard and my dad being Colombian, it was great to meet with Senator Bob Menendez and also obviously speak with others in attendance and to remind ourselves why the Hispanic community is so great, why we continue to grow, and why we continue to contribute on a daily basis. So once again, congratulations to Senator Robert Menendez for an excellent turnout at Union City High School. Again, if you haven't been to that facility, what are you waiting for? It's a marvelous building, and the stadium right on the roof is something to watch. So once again, hey, if you can celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month in any way you can, please do so. And again, the senator did exactly that in Union City last weekend. And now let's move to Jersey City, where internal polling tells us that the incumbent, James Solomon, the councilman in Ward E in downtown Jersey City, holds a commanding lead over his challenger and a member of the Stephen Fulop ticket, current Jersey City prosecutor, Jake Hudnut. Shout out to John Hines with Hudson County View for his report on this story. Now, a poll paid by the councilman's campaign shows a big lead over the challenger coming up as November 2nd is right around the corner. According to the internal polling, quote, Councilman James Solomon has a lead of 47% to 11% as voters like him and think he's doing a good job. Now, ALG Research, Brian Stryker and David Poyer collectively wrote this in a poll memo to the Solomon campaign as recently as September the 15th. Quote, he's in a strong position to be reelected over Jake Hudnut, who has mixed popularity in terms of his rating and little name ID. Folks, that's very interesting. And listen, I think we've all learned that polling sometimes can be very misleading. We learned that during the 2016 presidential campaign and even during some congressional midterm elections as well. So polling, again, is not always an exact science. I would argue this is probably going to be the most interesting race coming up on November 2nd in Jersey City, where, again, maybe some other incumbents look a little vulnerable, but I would argue with Stephen Fulop's, overwhelming support in the city, not just with the Hudson County Democratic Organization, but his fundraising advantage, you would think anyone on his ticket is a sure bet to win on November 2nd. It would seem that Jake Hudnut would follow in that manner. And of course, folks, I would argue that, and again, if Stephen Fulop is true to his word that he won't run for a fourth term in 2025, one would argue that coming up here in Ward E, whoever wins this council seat is definitely in the driver's seat to run for mayor in 2025. We'll see what happens on November 2nd, but right now it seems to be looking good for Councilman James Solomon. Lastly, October's right around the corner, ladies and gentlemen. As you all know, obviously with COVID hopefully behind us, I get to host the 13th edition of A Professor's Quest to Save Breasts. Coming up on Friday night, October the 8th, at the famous Mama Juana Cafe by the river in West New York, right along River Road, I'll be hosting this event. And joining me, of course, will be my outstanding co-host, the iconic Vladimir Carrero, my amazing broadcast partner, Maria Rodriguez-Gregg, the gorgeous Ashley Summers, and of course, the stunning Sylvia Sapinska, as we'll be raising money to hopefully defeat breast cancer once and for all on behalf of the American Cancer Society. As you can see, the link is there where you can donate online, but more importantly, folks, I hope to see you once again on Friday night, October the 8th. As you can see, the flyer is there, plenty of sponsors. There's just an overwhelming sense of support for what this event represents. Since 2008, I'm proud to tell you that this event has raised $52,853 to benefit Making Strides Against Breast Cancer, and of course, ultimately, to help the American Cancer Society. Folks, October coming up is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and it's a cause that's near and dear to me. Whether it's family members, whether it's friends, neighbors, colleagues, breast cancer has affected all of us in some way, shape, or form. Let's do our part to get rid of breast cancer. You can do that, once again, by coming out on Friday night, October the 8th, to Mama Juana Cafe in West New York from 8 p.m. until 2 a.m. $40 admission will be at the door. Cash only, please. Also, there'll be plenty of prizes being raffled off. We'll have 3 great DJs during the evening, and once again, all proceeds benefit the American Cancer Society. And that's our show for this week. To check out all the excellent programming brought to you by the leader in independent media here in Hudson County, the Hudson Media Group, check out their websites, www.hmgtvshows.com, along with www.livestream.com/hmgtv, and also on their YouTube page. Make sure you like the Hudson Media Group on Facebook and also follow them both on Instagram and Twitter. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, every Wednesday you can check out the latest edition of the 5-time award-winning podcast, Talkin' the Hudson, by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/TalkinTheHudson. Recent guests have included Tap Into Jersey City columnist Al Sullivan, Jersey City Times founder and editor Aaron Morrill, activist Sofia Frontera, Hudson County Democratic Organization chairwoman Amy DeGees, and many more. You can download the episode and listen to it from anywhere, anytime, from any PC, Mac, smartphone, or tablet. Check me out on social media, folks, on Instagram at Professor Fernando Uribe, and also on Twitter at NoFilterUribe. And certainly, you can check out the show on Facebook as well. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, you know it's always talking politics right here with the Hudson Media Group. I'm New Jersey's premier journalist and the sworn enemy of all the local liberals, social justice clowns, and woke fools, Fernando Uribe, saying so long, and as always, thank you so much for watching.
Don't forget to catch Fernando's podcast at blogtalkradio.com/talkonthehudson. New episodes available every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.